there's a certain nervousness, of course, in Moscow. This comes only a few days after a drone attack on the Kremlin, right next to Red Square, where the parade took place today. So there's a sense of nervousness about holding these parades. Lots of regions didn't hold them today.
David Lewis is a professor of global politics at the University of Exeter and a former Foreign Office Russia analyst. David, good evening. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you.
What we've heard from Putin today, he's sort of, ramping up the accusations of Nazism towards the West. He's using his words in this fight to maintain integrity. Is it working within his own nation, within Russia?
Very hard to say. He's trying to generate some kind of patriotic feeling, linking this war back to the Great Patriotic War, in which millions of Soviet citizens fought and many died, of course, against Nazi Germany, and even back to Napoleon's invasion of Russia back in 1812, trying to make this part of a long history of Russian patriotism. But for many Russians, this doesn't look like those kind of major cataclysmic events in which they faced an existential threat. Many Russians are skeptical about the war, or at least about the official justification for the war. So I think Russian society is split. Some people certainly buy the patriotic argument. Some people are persuaded by Russian propaganda, but others see this as a real threat to their lives in terms of mobilization and, of course, to their economic well-being and their future in the country. So there's a lot of polarization in society over this. But of course, people are not able to express that publicly. And so it's quite difficult to read the social mood across Russia.
One absence today was the sort of lack of hardcore Russian military hardware. We didn't see much of it, and I wonder whether that is, because it's been directed elsewhere in the war effort, or because Putin wants to maintain some coyness about what he has.
It's clearly a very scaled-back parade. It looked like a state under pressure. There was none of the sort of great pomp that you've seen sometimes at previous victory parades. And I think there's a certain nervousness, of course, in Moscow. This comes only a few days after a drone attack on the Kremlin, right next to Red Square, where the parade took place today. So there's a sense of nervousness about holding these parades. Lots of regions didn't hold them today because of security concerns. So it comes at a moment of quite strong vulnerability for Russia, and lots of Russian citizens, I think, are thinking, can the government really protect us? Is this really a state that is fulfilling its sort of security concerns against a potential enemy? So there are lots of nervous sort of cracks in the Russian elite and vulnerabilities emerging. We see that in the opposition to Putin emerging from Russian nationalists in particular. So I think it's a moment of real strain for Putin, and you can see that in the nature of the parade today. Scaled back, quite short, a lack of top military technology there, and they're all waiting really now for a Ukrainian counteroffensive, and that's going to be the real test for the Russian military.
What do you make of the head of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin? He gave his own video address today, didn't he? At the same time that Putin was speaking, he did his via Telegram, the Telegram messaging app. And in it, he said that Russia did not deserve to celebrate any recent victories, only historic ones. It was expletive-ridden. He was furious at the military hardware on display in Red Square, while, of course, he's been calling for more hardware backup out in Ukraine. That's a pretty risky move. I mean, his dissatisfaction with Putin and with Russia is clearly not going away. I wonder about the positioning of him and Putin.
Yes, I think this is the latest in a series of very angry video recordings from Prigozhin. But for the first time, I think today you saw him really taking a bit of a swipe at Putin himself, which is very rare. Putin is normally kept out of these debates. He's really targeted the leadership of the Ministry of Defense before and complained that he's just not getting the equipment and the munitions. I think there is some sympathy probably for Prigozhin among parts of the military, a sense that this has not been a campaign that's been run well, that some people are sitting in Moscow enjoying the good life, as it were, while they're on the front lines. And so he may generate some some potential support for this kind of position, but he's also taking a lot of risks. This is a level of insubordination that is pushing him probably over some red lines with people in the Kremlin. And there may be those who start to think he's becoming more of part of a problem than a potential solution. So but it shows the kind of tensions that are building, I think, in Moscow, and the concerns about the conduct of the war, and whether actually the Russian military can withstand a forthcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive.
Look, it's fascinating to hear from you. Thank you, David Lewis, who's a professor of global politics at the University of Exeter and a former Foreign Office Russia analyst. Thank you so much for your take on the day.